All right, another Friday. Happy Friday. Welcome to Fridays with Fidelman. I'm Cheryl Fidelman, life coach, trauma healer, and writer. And today's topic on Fridays with Fidelman is, who do you think you are? I ask my clients this a lot, and it's often like a writing homework assignment, a running homework assignment. Who do you think you are? And not in the derogatory sense of like, well, who do you think you are? But who is it that you think you are or would be if you didn't experience the trauma that programmed your way of being? Who do you think you are without your codependent tendencies? Who would you be if you weren't trying to manage the relationship that you're in, or manage your desires? Or who do you think you are if you weren't trying to consistently prove something about yourself to somebody else, or to your boss, or to your family? Who is the self that you feel was potentially set aside in order to survive the circumstances that you were in when you were a child? So there's always some dream or fantasy of our truly realized selves that potentially we feel like we're not being, or we're not expressing, because we're in a job where we feel like, well, I have to work this job another 10 years, for my pension or my retirement, even though I hate this job and this job sucks, or it's not a full expression of myself, or you're in a relationship where you feel like, well, I have to stay in this relationship because there's a particular structure to this relationship, and there's a particular way in which we're locked in, and I'm managing the emotions and they're managing the finances, or I'm managing the finances and they're managing the children, or you're not, or you have to like repress some form of your expression in order to survive inside of that relationship. And that repression of expression that you have in your relationship and or your job and or your family is what is like stealing the fullest expression of yourself. And if that fullest expression of yourself wasn't being stolen or compromised in your family, job, or relationship, what do you think it would be? Who do you think that you are that you're not being because of circumstances, or because of the natural tendency that you have towards hiding, the natural tendency that you have towards conforming? What would your life look like if you didn't have that natural tendency? It's almost like, what is your dream self? But saying it as if it's your dream self sort of makes it feel like it's like unattainable, or some fantasy, or some life that you think like, I'm living my default life because this is the life that, like, this is the only life that I'm set up to lead, which is like a lesser expression of your true self or your dream self. And so it's an illusion that you're stuck in the persona or way of being or identity or job title that you're in, or the role that you have in your family. It's an illusion that you're actually stuck there and that it defines you, and that there's no other definition of you, or whatever definition of you would be outside of that is lost on this go around in life. And also examine where you think you may be seeking permission from another person. Oh, I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi. Like, well, I can't be who I think I am because I don't have permission to be that. Well, where does that permission lie? Who do you need that permission from? Is that permission outside of you? Is it with your boss? Is it with your spouse? Is it with your partner? Is it with your children? Is it with your family? Are you waiting for the permission from your financial situation? Like, well, my financial situation doesn't actually permit me to live the life that I want to lead. And what is that life that you want to lead, and where and how and when can that permission actually come from you? Like, who is that person that you think that you are, and what are the steps that you can be taking regardless of your job, relational, family situation that would start to express who you think you are? And also what's interesting, and I've said this before, and this is kind of echoes my video that I put out several months ago called Codependence is a Belief System. So I would ask that in conjunction with this video, you review the Fridays with Fidelman from a few months ago called Codependence is a Belief System. Because oftentimes when I ask people, who do you think you are? Some people know, like, oh, well, I know I'm an artist, right? Or I know I'm a teacher, or I know that I would actually want to work with a different kind of company where the culture in the company is a little bit fosters creative or individual expression more than the current company that I'm working for. And also some people just say, I don't know. I don't know who I think I am. I don't know who I would be if I hadn't made the choices that I've made that I feel like I'm locked into right now. Actually, I don't know who that person is, which is really just as wonderful as knowing who you think you are. Because if you don't know, that's great. Because oftentimes the human mind has a hard time hanging and not knowing. So it will have you stay where you're at because that's what you know. That's what you know. Those are the habitual grooves that are in your brain to be in and survive the current construct that you're in. And to actually think, well, what would my life be like if I wasn't in this current construct? I don't know, so the not knowing has you stay where you're at even more because the human mind can't really hang in the not knowing. And the not knowing is like an inquiry. It's an inquiry. It's also a revisiting of potentially times when you were younger, where there was some sort of a knowing of who you uniquely are. And that your uniqueness, you kind of got used to being, okay, I'm unique in these ways, but it's actually easier to just play the game that everybody else is playing. And so eventually you set aside or you forget what your particular special uniquenesses are. And then another thing that may keep us from discovering and exploring and investigating who you think you are or who we think we are is, well, like, I know who I am, but there's no room for that person in the construct and paradigm that I'm currently in. There's just no room for it. So why would I spend any time looking there? Well, it's the looking there that, for one thing, are going to give you feelings, emotions, and sensations that potentially you haven't felt in a long time because you had to set them aside. So we've been traumatized into accepting a particular way of life, whether or not we like it or not. And then for those of us who have some sort of an idea well, I always wanted to be a dancer or always wanted to be an athlete. It's easy to think, well, I think I know who I am, and I think I know what my heart and my soul would really naturally enjoy doing. That seems like just a natural expression of myself. I know it, but I'm not going to do it because, I can't fit it into my current life. Well, not being able to fit something into your current life, I'm going to put out there that it's an illusion. So what you're saying is like, I can't fit myself into my current life. And that, I think, is a traumatic identity response. So I'm going to fully identify with this job or relationship or family context that I don't feel aligned with, but being in a context that I don't feel aligned with is actually the norm of life. And that is your traumatic identity. And so to go beyond the identity that your trauma has like squozen you into, what is the identity beyond that? And so, and it doesn't even mean that you have to start future tripping and, well, Cheryl, like, I think I'm supposed to be a dancer, but I'm not going to quit my job and try to become some award-winning dancer. No, but you can take a dance class, find a dance class every Monday night for $15 and just start doing a little bit of that thing that sparks you, that reminds you of who you are, that gives you some passion, that gives you the experience of being actually congruent in your mind, body, and soul. An experience where you're not continually contorting, fixing, managing, handling, ignoring what feels good. Those are all characteristics of your traumatic identity. So start giving your somatic system, your body, your nervous system, the experience of feeling aligned, the experience of that thing that sparks you, that thing that makes you happy. Even if it's like, you buy an easel and you paint in your den like every Tuesday night from 4 to 5. It's like simple assignment to give yourself where it's like, this is me. Oh my gosh, this is me. This is where I can breathe. This is where I can move the way that I want to move. This is where I can start to create new grooves in your mind of joy. New grooves in your mind of an identity that you're actually choosing, right? Because for most of our lives, we walk through life with an identity that we actually haven't chosen. We've been traumatized into that identity. And when you start to introduce little bits and pieces of who you think you are, then when you're operating in the rest of your life, different sides of you will start to show up. And you'll be less automatically willing to compromise because you start to experience self. You start to experience a relationship with yourself. You start to remember and realize who you think you are. That way, when you're in these experiences, you can't totally be sucked fully into that identity anymore, right? More of you, more surface area of you and your expression and your experience of self and your experience of being alive is exposed. And also on the heels of the video that I put out last week, which is, I forgot what I titled it. It was something around like healing is an Olympic level practice, right? Like practice healing as if healing is an Olympic sport, like you're training for an Olympic sport, you're healing at an Olympic training level. And so when you start to do little bits and pieces and start to experience yourself as who you think you are, and if you don't know, if you start to allow yourself to be in the inquiry, then what you're doing is you're training your nervous system to be in a regulated state. Because when you're in full relationship with yourself, that is a practice of regulation. And then you bring that regulation into the other areas of your life, whether or not they're areas that whether or not you want that job or not, or whether or not you want that relationship or not, you're still now experiencing more of yourself in a regulated state in these other areas that you're in. I also want to point to circumstance when it comes to who you think you are. Because it's so easy to think that circumstance is stealing our true identity. Circumstance is stealing our true self. And I want to flip that in saying that you are giving your true self to your circumstance. You're compromising the truest expression of yourself to fit into the circumstance because you know that circumstance, you know how it's working, you know how to operate within it. And so you'll let go of some truer, ultimate expression of yourself because you're not quite sure yet how to manage and survive inside of the truest expression of yourself because we're not trained, right? For a lot of us who are codependents or recovering codependents or who have experienced traumatic childhoods, it's like kind of awkward to think, well, how would I even operate or be? Who would that person be if I was being who I think I am? How would that person move? How would that person dress? What kind of decisions or choices would that person make? How would that person even communicate if I'm being the truest expression of myself and not allowing circumstance to steal my identity? And hanging in that unknown is the most beautiful part of life, right? Predictability, even though predictability, it's valuable, right? But hanging in not being able to predict or anticipate what's next gives us a freedom of identity to explore and create and not have some hold on how the future is going to go, because if you release your hold, you don't know what's going to happen, or the person you're codependent onto is going to you're not going to know how they're going to react, and you need them to exist in a particular way in order to give you your identity and your existence. And if you're no longer managing that situation, then what's going to happen? Is that person going to abandon me? Am I going to be able to manage my future and manage who I am? And what if I don't even know who I am in some future dream me concept? And in that sense, we allow our traumatic identity to steal our lives, to steal our fun, our joy, our passion, our sovereignty, the things that we really, really, truly enjoy doing, where that possibly we can give our best gifts to humanity. We can be of service in the ways we are naturally, uniquely talented to provide service if we're not continually in our traumatic identity. So I want to pose that as a question, an inquiry. Who do you think you are? Please email me, message me, put a comment in the YouTube. And so there's who do you think you are? And then what is it you think about your traumatic identity that would keep you from exploring and diving into who you think you are? Is it some construct in your family? Is it like there's actually a feeling of there's actually no space for me? And what does that feel like? And how do we start to become a sovereign being so that all the permission and space to be you is actually in your hands? It's not in the hands of someone else and them giving permission, or their emotional or psychological state has to give you permission. I think that one of the reasons why our traumatic identity develops is because when we're kids, we become the person we're permitted to be. We become the person that there was space for. And it's usually a smaller version of ourselves because there was no room for the fullest expression of ourselves when we were kids. But as adults, we actually really no longer need that permission anywhere. And so in my work, we start to some people say take back the power, and on some level, that's a true, a great way to put it. But really having the experience of like, there is no other permission. And where am I trapped in a circumstance where it's no longer my parents that don't have room for me, but it's now the circumstance where there's no room for me to move and express outside the box of my traumatic identity. And I think this is a similar inquiry when people talk about like, there's some other kind of life I should have had if I had X upbringing. And this is like I said earlier in the video, this is my default life. This is the best I can do with what was given to me or how I was shaped, or my educational path, or my parents' psychological disposition. This is the best that I can do with what I was provided in the container that I was brought up in. So, another question would be, if you weren't in this default life, what is the fantasy life that you think that you should have had? So it'd be good to examine what you think the fantasy life is. What's the gap between that fantasy life and the life that you're leading? And how would we bridge that gap? And how much of that fantasy life is attainable? Stretchy, out of the box, but still not pie in the sky and actually attainable. All right, I think that's everything. And again, I think that this video links back around well to the codependence as a belief system that I put out, I think over the summer. Have an awesome weekend, everybody. Happy healing. You are awesome. And life is when? Now. Bye.